Yeah, so this morning we are going to be doing a medieval sip and stitch, basically sip and stitch and bitch. And I've decided that this morning's project, I'm going to actually go ahead and apply the braiding, the finger loop braiding that I made for this gown to the neckline. So we finally get some nice decorative elements around the neckline. And I actually I braided this. I did one set in Thailand and one set here in Korea. So this is a very international bit of finger loop braiding here. And I'll see if I can bring it up to the camera here so you can see. This is what's called a chevron of 8, and this is made from silk. And actually, I purchased this silk at Penzik a year and a half ago. So I've had it for a while. And I specifically bought it for embroidery and for finger loop braiding. So there is actually a pretty famous portrait from the 15th century that shows a woman in her kimura and her husband. Actually, it's a wedding set of wedding portraits, and they're looking at each other in profile, and you can actually see this chevron pattern in, I think, green and gold actually around the neckline of her kimura. So yeah, let me see. I have tea in a Penzik mug. Oh, good morning from Connecticut. Thank you for joining us. My mother is actually a Connecticut native, and I spent a lot of my childhood in summers in Connecticut. This morning, I actually have gui hua ta, oolong ta, from a tea plantation in northern Thailand in Chiang Rai, or outside of Chiang Rai. So yeah, I guess we're all just enjoying some beverage of choice is tea so far. Earl Grey, but I don't think I'll make another until tomorrow. Yeah, well, I guess the advantage for me of doing this in the morning, my time, or midday, is that it's okay to have caffeine. Although caffeine doesn't seem to affect me like that. So yeah, as the format is, I'm going to work and sew. I'm going to chat. If you have questions or comments, then please do pop them in the live chat. Thank you, handsome husband. He just made me a fresh pot of tea. He's so wonderful. And I'm also going to be talking as we work about some of the findings I've had in the research for my video on 15th century Irish fashion, because the topic of Irish fashion is actually a challenge, and I enjoy a good research challenge. I also enjoy a good research challenge because it means there are many questions and there's room for debate. And for some reason, I prefer situations in which there's room for interpretation and creativity rather than a very clear-cut picture of everything. Oh, good. Oh, Zach, it's good. I was wondering, corset pattern maker. I should have guessed that. So for those who don't know, corset pattern maker here is Zach. He has a corset pattern company, and I'm not certain how many patterns he has out yet. But if you're looking for good patterns for corsets, I would recommend checking out his website. No, he's not a sponsor of this channel. That's just me putting out the word for my fellow creatives. Yeah, I've just been informed that my hot tea isn't in fact hot, just in case anyone was wondering. Also, please don't forget to hit that thumbs up, guys. And if you aren't subscribed, please hit the subscribe button. And also, for those who don't know, you actually have to hit that notification bell and choose to be notified of all things, or it will only notify you of things that Master Algorithm thinks you want to be notified of, which might not actually be, in fact, everything that you care about on my channel or any other channel. Ooh, cinnamon clove tea, that is a nice choice. I do like a good, powerful set of flavors. I grew up with what I didn't realize at the time, but now know was an extremely deviated septum. And so what that means is that I did not have a very good sense of smell for most of my life. And so I developed a taste for very strong flavors like cinnamon and cloves. When I make pumpkin pot pie, wow. When I make a pumpkin pie or a pumpkin custard, you know it has spices. There are no questions asked. Oh, okay. So my friend Zach says they're also starting to sell pret-à-porter corsets, ready-to-wear corsets, and made-to-measure ones, so custom ones as well. So do check out his website, guys. Unfortunately, Zach, I don't think you can pop it in the chat because I think the chat will automatically delete it. But if you share the link with me, then I can post it in the comments later, and it won't delete it if I post it. So there it is. So the nice thing about doing finger loop braiding for trim around a neckline is that it is super flexible. because of the nature of finger loop braiding. And you can see here, I can actually make it a little bit thicker by just kind of scrunching it up, or I can make it lie more thinly depending on how I attach it. So yeah, it's finger loop braiding is a really great choice for any sort of trim where you've got curves and you need to be able to manipulate it into a space. And actually that's why I'm redoing this, because I want to make it a little bit fatter, as it were. So I'm just going to scrunch it a little bit as I work my way along and pin it on. I have to say I've been pretty damn drained lately. Emotionally, there's just been a lot of crap happening in our lives, and God knows the situation in the United States is a total shit show, and it's just eating me alive. So I just haven't had very much creative energy, and so I decided that this morning, my dear friends, I would try to dig up some creative energy with you all. I have been pouring my energy into content creation, though, so that means that I've been doing a lot of video work and not a lot of actual, the favorite thing for me to do, which is actually creating things. I've spent so much time making videos that I haven't had time to make the things about which I would like to make videos. Oh, goodness. My dream is that my channel actually gets earns enough money that I can actually pay someone else to make the videos, and I just have to worry about filming the raw footage, and then they pile it into a beautiful video. But this channel makes nothing, and I mean, like, I maybe make $100 a month between $120 a month between Patreon and YouTube monetization. This is not the way to go if you actually want to make a living. At least not in my field. If I were a gamer, I could probably be making big bucks by just streaming my gaming. Especially if I dressed super objectifyingly sexy and put my hair in cute schoolgirl pigtails and more ridiculous makeup. I'm not bitter or anything. Anyway, so I have been doing a lot of research lately into medieval Irish fashion. And it started off as exploring 15th century Irish fashion, but it's kind of to understand 15th century Irish fashion, I actually had to look at the periods before and the period after, which often happens when you don't have a complete record of clothing in any given era. You kind of have to look at the bumper areas to really get a good idea. Sorry, let me make sure I'm actually relatively center here. So yeah, what I found first off is there's a lot of misconceptions about some of the layers of Irish fashion and the language. And I think it takes me as a linguist maybe coming in with a bit of a fresh perspective in Irish fashion and treating language the way it should be treated, which is to say what a word means in one century is not necessarily what that word means in a later century. And that the word, that the item, the garment that word is describing is not going to stay unchanged for centuries, because humans like new things. We just do. We're peacocks at heart, and we like new, and we like different, and we like flashy. So the exceptions there are when culture beats the flash out of us, which the Victorians did. Let me just check the questions. How's Ryan's Farsetto coming? Yeah, it's actually on the table now, right across the way. We are I actually just did a teaser video about the start of the process. We are just getting started on it really finally. Again, it's been a rough year and a half for us. And creative energy is a special kind of energy. And when life is draining you dry, you just don't necessarily have the energy for the process of creation. And honestly, when it comes to creating clothing, it's easy to do finger loop braiding, right? Like this doesn't take a lot of mental energy. This isn't easy for me anyway. It's really easy. It's mindless. I don't have to think about it or intellectualize the process to do finger loop braiding. But when it comes to garment creation, you really should not do it in a semi-zombified state. You should have all of your faculties available, because otherwise you're going to make mistakes. And especially when you're recreating a historic garment based on the historic garment, not based on a commercial pattern, you're not just following along. You actually have to intellectualize the process. So what that means is that I just really haven't had a lot of energy for the creation of new garments, and I'm trying to dredge up the energy now. We're forced into this spot where we have to make a new farsetto for my condottiero, because his is literally disintegrating. It is threadbare. I cannot patch it anymore because the original, it's like Theseus's ship. It's at this point, I might as well just make a new one because I can't even, the wood of the ship, original wood of the ship is just not even strong enough to take a patch. So we've been forced to take his old falsetto apart and use it kind of as a basis for this new one. But I'm still going to be treating it like reworking it to more line up with the style of construction in Diego di Cavaniglia's falsetto. So that does take a little more mental energy than just copying the old one, you know. I could do that, but on the other hand, I don't want to invest all that time and energy into making something that is only kind of sort of correct when I have new information on what correct construction should be versus what I had back in 2012. Because when I made this, the blue arming falsetto that he has that is now falling apart 12 years ago, I had just discovered Diego di Cavaniglia's falsetto. In fact, it had just been published. So there wasn't a lot of information out about it yet. So all I had were pictures. I didn't have the details that I now have. So, yeah. Back to the topic of language. Zach says, consider the difference between butt dial and booty call. Yes, indeed. Indeed, language is a funny thing. So in terms of medieval Irish clothing, one word that a lot of people lean on and they utter it with tones of almost a dogmatic sanctity, a holiness, is the lena. And the lena is, people think it's a specific thing. They think it's this giant saffron dyed shirt. And that is the form that the lena may take in the 16th century, but not necessarily for everyone, and I'll tell you why in a bit. But lena, when you get back to the language, to the Old Irish, and especially if you actually go look at the official definitions of the word in the Old Irish dictionaries, and how there is actually such a thing, by the way, and in how the word is described in its own period, lena just means shirt. It just means smock, and it is the layer that goes against your skin. And lena actually comes from the Latin word for linen, linteum. So it's a corruption of that because linen was apparently, the theory is that linen was introduced by the Romans. So either way, the word that survived into Old Irish for linen was the Latinate word. And so it makes sense that the garment that is made of linen would then they would shorthand that from linen shirt, whatever it may have been in the 3rd century AD, to just lena, to just linen. And what's interesting, what I found out about the word linen, lena, is there are actually medieval Irish manuscripts in Latin that have Irish glosses in them, medieval Irish glosses. So some monk was working in this Latin script, and he was going through and making notes in the margins in medieval Irish, explaining some of the Latin terms that are included in the document. And one of the terms that one of the monks actually went and glossed was the word lena, and he just defines it very clearly as camisia, or excuse me, he glossed the word camisia, which is Latin for shirt, and he glossed it as lena in the margin in the Irish, so that whoever was reading it would understand that the word camisia, shirt, meant lena. That means it's not, and he didn't go on to say it's a special kind of shirt or anything like that. It's just described as a camisia, as a shirt. So I think we need to divorce ourselves from preconceptions that a lena is some kind of special kind of shirt, when really it's no different than the word smock or even the word tunic in some cases. Comment, Irish brat brings smiles because in today's language, a brat is a naughty, cheeky boy of a certain age, right? Brat, yeah, brat. The word brat is another word that really just means mantle. And the shape of the brat and the decoration of the brat changes over time and can vary within a period of time. So, again, people want to say, I want to make a brat. And I'm like, okay, well, what era? What social class? Because it's not this unchanging garment over 1,000 years of Irish fashion. The Irish were apparently humans and, again, liked their clothing to change. But I did find out, interestingly, that apparently the Irish wool was exported heavily into Italy in the 14th and 15th centuries, and that the brat itself, they manufactured brat. Brat were made in Ireland to be exported to the continent. There's actually an inventory expense account book entry for it. And there's a couple of different references on the continent to it. So apparently, because the wool for a brat, there are different kinds of brat, and there's one way that you can actually make a brat in which you treat the wool with honey and vinegar, and it makes it all like woolly and fuzzy, but softly fuzzy and curly on one side, and then the other side stays smooth, apparently. And so that would actually make it so that the inside was actually woollier and warmer. And so I can definitely see how there, and especially as Europe is going into the Little Ice Age, how there's an increasing demand for this special treatment of cloak, of mantle, people who want, you know, to be extra warm, and maybe also to have bragging rights to say, look, I have this exotic Irish garment. So yeah, so one of the things I'm making a video on, I'm focusing on the 15th century because that's kind of my jam, but I'm going to have to be talking about some of these other periods in the video in order to make the points clear. But, you know, I'm going to be discussing things like that in this video, whose script I'm almost done with. And actually, that video is going to get published on Irish Medieval History. My good friend Philip, I'm going to publish the one on men's clothing on his channel and the one on women's clothing on my channel. So we're trying to do a lot of collaborative work. But, you know, there's a lot of interesting preconceptions that people have about the brat, or about Irish clothing, and, you know, and Irish fashion, and, you know, that it was always one thing or it was always another thing. There's this idea that, you know, Irish men always went around barefooted, but that's very clearly not true, because one, we have plenty of, I've found multiple visual art iconographic depictions of Irish kings wearing shoes. Thank you for joining. One of my channel members just joined us. Thank you for joining us this morning, Kay. I really appreciate it. Yeah, so for those who don't know, I have a Patreon and a YouTube membership. So if you want to support my channel more directly, you can become a YouTube channel member, or you can become a member of my Patreon. And of course, I have all kinds of exclusive content on both platforms for my generous supporters, including behind the scenes stuff, unedited videos, extra videos, extra tutorials, lessons, that kind of stuff. Thank you for joining us this morning. Oh, let me see. Looking forward to seeing the videos when they're done. Yeah, so am I. No, actually, I've got to get the medieval Irish, the 15th century men's Irish clothing done this week. That's on. I want to get it done like tomorrow. Actually, is my goal. Yeah. So we will see how that proceeds, because of course I keep finding more information. I go down these rabbit holes and I keep finding more information that I feel obligated to include in the script. And then the script gets longer, and the longer the script gets, the longer the video gets, the more editing I have to do. It's this horrible exponential knock-on effect. But yeah, I have found some really good information. For instance, talking about the shoes and going around barefoot. It's, you know, if one reads I found an essay, I don't remember who wrote it, but it was a very good essay because it quoted directly, it took full excerpts out of medieval Irish epics and poems that clearly refer to the king wearing shoes. So no, Irish kings and Irish noblemen, I assume, did not always go around barefoot. Probably when it was practical, when they were out in the muck of a bog, probably, you know, that makes sense, and especially, I guess, if it's not super cold, which it wouldn't have been in the first millennium when most of these epics and poems were written, by the way. But, you know, it makes sense that in other contexts you would want to wear shoes, because shoes are also another way to show flash. That being said, I have found evidence of European visitors to Ireland talking about the Irish they encountered in a royal court, including the king not wearing shoes. So, you know, it's not a question of always wore shoes or never wore shoes. It seems like with medieval women's underwear, some people wore shoes in Ireland and some people didn't, which is certainly different from the continent. No one talks about Italians going around barefoot. Questions. What about dividing it into parts? Oh, well, I'm already, yeah. So at first it was going to be a video. What about dividing the video on medieval Irish clothing into parts? Yes, well, I've already done that. First it was going to be 15th century Irish clothing, and I was going to cover men and women. And then I realized that that was impractical to cover in one video in the time that I had allotted. So I said, okay, I'll divide it into men's and women's. And yeah, I now am also considering dividing it into Irish clothing, as in the clothing worn by the Irish outside of the Pale, and then clothing worn by the Irish inside of the Pale. And for those who don't know, the Pale in the 15th century was the basically the English-controlled part of Ireland. It was more like the Southern Ireland. It was Limerick, Waterford, Dublin, and Cork. That part of Ireland fell into the Pale, which was the part under Irish control, English control. But you know, it was this cultural blend within the Pale of Irish and English, because you had a lot of Irish intermarrying with the English and vice versa. And, you know, they often had relatives and clans who also lived outside of the Pale. And so there was this heavy influence of continental fashions that were in the Pale, but also some clear adaptations, variations on the theme of, you know, worn by Irish within the Pale. And I've recently finally just found a whole bunch of wills registered in Dublin from the second half of the 15th century. And so that allowed me to go back and edit some of my thoughts on clothing within the Pale and possibly also clothing outside of the Pale. And yeah. Interesting times. These are the kind of rabbit holes I go down. I actually also had the thought, it might be interesting for you guys to actually join me on one of my rabbit hole dives where I live stream my process of starting with a topic and show you how I use digital research tools to find the kind of rare and usually unknown sources that I find. I thought that might be interesting for you to go along with the process. And I thought I might present it as a kind of choose your own adventure situation where you actually like tell me, well, go check this out. And then I go click on that link and we go see where that takes us. Let me know if that'd be of interest to you, to see how firsthand how my research process works. Comment. In my head, the Pale means the part of the Russian Empire where Jews were allowed to live. My family got out of there mostly before World War I, thank God. Oh yeah. So, you know, the Pale, that's interesting. Russian Empire was called the Pale in Russian because this is the English term. The word Pale actually means the fence, the wall. And so beyond the Pale meant the parts of Ireland beyond the wall that surrounded the Irish or the English-controlled parts of the English colony. Because in the 14th century, there was this Gaelic resurgence that kind of pushed the English down into the south, the English leaders into the south of Ireland. And so that's why what had been called the Lordship of Ireland, I think, started being called the Pale. So part of the problem with the flexibility of, it's a blessing and it's a curse. The flexibility of the finger loop braiding means that it will happily snake around whether you want it to snake and curve or not. So I'm having to go back and straighten out some of this. You know, I found back to my research into the medieval Irish clothing, you know, the last time I was in Ireland was 2009, but the last time I was at the National Museum of Ireland in Dublin was 2007, and that was before I was doing any of this content creation stuff, and I'm kicking myself, and of course I don't even think I had a phone that could take pictures back then. I'm kicking myself for not having had a camera with me when I went to the museum and gotten pictures of the bog clothes that are on display there because, my dear friends, if any of you are connected to the National Museum of Ireland, please tell them that they suck because their digital collection does not include any of the extant medieval garments that they have found in the bogs. And that is so frustrating. There is a new book out, brand new book. It just recently came out that apparently supposedly shows all of the textiles that have been found from medieval Ireland in the bogs and whatnot. It's on my list of things to buy when we once again are more gainfully employed than we currently are. But in the meanwhile, digital resources on extant medieval Irish garments are relatively sparse, and that's frustrating because that museum has a treasure trove. Okay. Comments. I'm assuming that is an English translation. My second great uncle stayed behind and was in Minsk when the city fell to the Germans. Right. Yeah. Well, you know, being in Russia wasn't even great if you were Jewish. It's a good thing you got out of there altogether, considering what Stalin went on to do. Yeah. So, yeah. But I have found some new documentary sources discussing from the end of the 14th and early 15th century, discussing Irish clothing, and also some sumptuary laws that are very interesting and informative. So that will all be going into the video. I think a lot of people have, in exploring medieval Irish clothing, have tried to nationalize it. And actually, I don't think that I know that, because I found several essays on the national clothing of Ireland, you know, a national traditional ensemble. And I think it's really dangerous to try to assign, especially medieval clothing, as a traditional costume of any particular place, because that wasn't a concept in the Middle Ages. Fashion was fashion, it was clothing, and it changed with time. It's not until the 19th century that you see the birth of this idea of really heavily of a national costume. I mean, in the 16th century, you start getting books that talk about, well, this is the national clothing of these people. And that's because it's actually kind of in the second half of the 15th century where you really start to see a significant divergence in fashion, from just being variations on a common theme in Europe to being, oh my gosh, this is very different. So, you know, it's really the second half of the 15th century that Italian fashion really starts to distinguish itself from the rest of the continent. And then the second half of the 15th century, you know, the Germans, it stops being variations on theme and it starts just getting drastically different. The same thing happens in Ireland in the 16th century. So I expect I'm probably going to get some hate for my views on on medieval Irish fashion, and that's okay. All engagement is good engagement, they say. Yeah. Zach, you're making corsets. What kind of corset are you making? Or corsets are you making? Yeah. Are they from a particular era and place, or are they sort of more the, you know, general modern corsets that are also kind of becoming very popular? I think I'm going to pin this on and then sew it and then go with the second one. Well, this one got pretty long. I've been meaning to experiment doing finger loop braiding with my condottiero, holding a stick that has the end of it, and then doing a super long one, because that's what you actually see in a lot of the illuminations depicting finger loop braiding from the 15th century. You see two people working. You see one person working the loops, and you see another person, sometimes someone far away actually, with a stick in their hand, and you can see the finished braid wrapped around the stick and loops still emanating from it. And so my thought is that they actually start pretty far apart so you can get really long braids. And the person who's at the bottom is actually the one tamping down the braid pattern so you can do it long. And they just roll the stick up as you know, as the braid progresses. Comment. Was the foreign account of an Irish king not wearing shoes describing the king when he was indoors? Where I live, we usually take shoes off indoors. So that is a good question. It didn't say. So this was a pilgrim. That's actually a good point. But this is an interesting one. I'll tell you that is very curious. It wasn't just taking off the shoes. So the Chronicle actually doesn't specify whether they're indoors or outdoors. He just says in the court of the king. And it was a Catalan pilgrim on his way to St. Patrick's Purgatory, which is, I had to look that up. I couldn't believe that was a thing. It is the shrine of St. Patrick. And apparently in the Middle Ages, it was of international fame. And many people from outside of Ireland would actually make the pilgrimage to it. as this Catalan gentleman, Catalan count did, actually. And what he says is that the great lords go barefoot, but they wear their spurs on their bare feet. So that is interesting. So yeah, actually, that's a good point. I don't know if it was indoors or outdoors, but it would make no sense to me to be wearing spurs indoors, because usually you only wear spurs when you're actually, you know, on horseback, even in this era. So yeah, that is a good question. In other, and actually I was going to say, then there is an illumination in Froissart's Chronique de France, or Chronique d'Angleterre, I think actually, where he chronicles the English expedition into Ireland, and there's an illumination there depicting the Irish kings, the Irish chieftains riding out to meet Richard II, or no, sorry, are riding out to meet one of the English peers, and they are depicted barefoot and with no stirrups and no saddles, as was customary for the Irish to wear, as the Irish tended to do at the time. So yeah, apparently they definitely also went out and about barefoot outside. So yeah, they might have also been barefoot inside, but they were definitely barefoot outside, at least sometimes, and on riding horses, no less. It's an interesting, and it's a custom that continued even into the Little Ice Age. So even as Ireland gets crazy cold, the Irish are still wandering around bog trotting, as Philip would say from Irish medieval history, in bare feet. Yeah, rather than wearing pattens to protect shoes and keep them, you know, mud free, they just decided to forego them altogether. You know, I don't know about you, but if my feet are cold, then the rest of me is cold. So maybe they were of a different constitution than we are. For those who've just joined, if you're enjoying, don't forget to hit that thumbs up. And when we publish, you know, leave a comment. Because all engagement really gets these videos in front of more people. Yeah. And for those who don't know what it is I'm doing right now, I am applying a silk finger loop braid, a chevron of 8 laces, or 8 loops, to the neckline of my pink gamora. And I just published a video on some of the key mistakes on this gown and what I'm going to be doing to fix them. So if you're interested in checking that out, it's about a 50-minute long video. I also talk about the resources that I used that were really key in helping me make this dress, that are available. Yeah, I talked about all the things I'm going to be doing to fix it. And I decided I almost started doing those things I needed to fix it. But actually, there is something completely draining, de-energizing about having to undo your work and redo it. So I felt today like I wanted to do something new, rather than redoing something I'd already done. That's why we're working on applying the silk finger loop braiding to the neckline, so that I don't have to go through the double energy spending of undoing hard work and redoing it, and instead just doing something fun and pretty, and medieval. Yeah. So I'm going to bring this up here to this camera. You can see this is the end that was anchored, and it's a little bit messy. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to undo this knot, and I'm going to just tuck this under at the end there. Maybe I can lower this and bring this closer down. That'll be better. Sorry, the right camera's going to get a little, I apologize. I'm trying to move it closer so that it's, you know, better for you all. Okay. Let's see. Will the finger loop braid be added to the sleeves as well? And has the TSA destruction been remediated? One piece at a time. I do not have visual evidence of any kind of trim going around, at least not this kind of trim anyway, going around the sleeves. She means going around this part of the sleeve. I don't, wow, there it is. I've got to take some soap. I don't even know what those stains are. It's impressive because it takes a lot to stain wool. Wool is generally stain repellent, so that makes me wonder what that is. Anyway, yeah, I don't actually have evidence of trim being applied to sleeves, visual or otherwise, for Florence for this era. I don't even have evidence of embroidery being used around this part of the sleeve for Florence. The Florentines, what we do have evidence of the beautiful embroidered patch that goes on the upper part of the sleeve, and maybe like the whole sleeve being embroidered. But I just don't have the evidence of trim around the sleeve edge. Do have evidence of trim around the neckline, and specifically what definitely looks like finger loop braiding. So I'm sticking to that. This is a simpler gown. This is not a fancy gown. This is a wool camora. For those who don't know, in Florence, there's actually a difference between a cotta and a camora. A camora is actually they're the same shape, basically. But the camora is generally nearly always made out of wool and is a much more humble garment. Whereas the cotta, you look at the inventories and the expense accounts, you can see that's the real fancy. That's basically, it is a camora in shape, but made out of silk and covered in embroidery and pearls and very elaborate. And the camora is a much more basic gown that does not really obscure the body. And in fact, I just published a short on this because we know that it was relatively revealing, because that is how Lucrezia de' Medici in the 1460s identifies Clarice d'Orsini as a good potential bride, because she actually gets to see her in her camora. And she actually gets to therefore judge her figure. And that's how she decides that she's a good candidate to become the next matron of the Medici clan, because she looks like she will be strong and be a good childbearer, which was true. Yeah. So yeah. Is anyone else working on anything? Zach is working on corsets. I've got my Guihua oolong cha from a green tea plantation in Chiang Rai, northern Thailand. So what I'm doing here is I'm just going to, I think I'm actually going to start saving all these little silk trimmings. And because I'm going to end up trimming this, I'm going to save all the little silk trimmings, and I'm actually going to see if I can put them in a bag, put them in my washer in the bag, and let the agitation from the washer agitate it to the point that it makes it fluffy. Because once I get enough, then we'll use that as the padding inside some of these 15th century padded garments. Because we're working on the new farsetto for my condottiero, and there are two extant farsetti from the 15th century, one from the 1430s, one from 1481, probably was made in the 1470s, and died. The owner died in it in 1471 or 1481, which was why I think it was probably made in the 1470s, because it was already showing lots of wear and tear by that point. Anyway, and they both are padded. They both have padding on the inside, and the one from the 1430s actually has a mix of wool, silk, linen, cotton, and hemp fibers in the padding. So what I'd like to do is, actually following that, I'd like to create my own fluffy mixed padding, mixed fluff, mixed padding to go inside to use as padding. But it'll take a little while. But it's a good way for me not to just throw away what I view as precious silk bits, the ends of thread and whatnot, and find another use for it, which is a very medieval approach to sustainability and consumption, to make sure you don't waste anything, that everything finds a role, finds a function. So actually, I think I'm going to fold it over a little bit more. Let's see. I am new to historical costuming. Does everyone else come on here when there are lives? Does nuclear Andal? I'm not certain I understand the question. I think maybe there was an autocorrect. Does everyone else come on here when there are lives? If you can just clarify that, I will happily answer that question. Next, working on a skirted boy's coat and acorn hat for kiddos Renaissance presentation. Oh, that sounds adorable. Oh, it's going to be so cute, an acorn hat on a little boy or a little human, whatever their actual gender is. That's going to be so cute. Skirted boy's coat. Very cool. Very cool. I'm trying to learn, and I had this come on my feed. Yeah, I just your question was, it said something about does everyone come on here when there are lives? What, I just don't know what. Oh, via lives. Oh, I see. Do I host virtual sewing groups? Oh, right. So I actually do for my patrons and my channel members. I do, I keep saying I'm going to do it more, and I mean to. I do actually host, I want to get into hosting more often, Zoom sessions where we actually can sew together or work on projects together. And then I can actually, see what people are doing and work on them. So that is something I will be doing. I promise my patrons and my channel members I'm going to start doing that more often. Life's just been carrying me away lately. But yeah, that is something I do plan on starting to offer much more often for my patrons and my channel members. So I will be doing that. If you mean in the sense of where we can actually all see each other and talk, yeah. I'm going to be doing a lot more of this kind of live stream on here on YouTube as a way to try to force myself to actually work on projects, because it's otherwise I always say, oh yeah, I'm going to work on that thing today, and then my depression and anxiety kind of gets the best of me. So fun times with the Contessa. Yeah. Yeah, so that is another perk that there will be for my patrons and my channel members, is that we will be doing more interactive Zoom sessions where you can even show me your project and then I can give you feedback even. I've watched a couple of your videos and I love the info you share. Thank you for this info. I'm subscribing and will consider your patron. My current project is Ren Fair Tunics. Thank you. Oh, well, thank you for watching, subscribing, and considering patronage. And I understand that everyone, we are living in dangerous and tough times. And I understand that not everyone has the finances to support creators like me. And I don't expect that. I really don't. I just appreciate you guys, coming out and supporting me by watching my videos, by interacting with me, by leaving comments and asking questions. Yeah, so I appreciate it all. I really do. Oh, and also, I'll say this here and we'll see if YouTube cancels me. For those who don't know, YouTube, if you want to support your creators without actually, and let's say you don't have the finances to financially support them, which is just fine, a non-financial way for you to support them financially is to actually click on the ads in the videos, because every click actually is significantly more money for your creator. Watching the ads is less than clicking, but if you skip the ads, your creator gets nothing from the ad revenue. And ad revenues are pretty squalid to begin with. So yeah, if you want a quick and easy way to support your creators and you don't necessarily have the money to give it to them directly, just click on that ad. You don't even have to watch the ad once it opens. Just click on it, and that click gets your creators funding. Yeah. Hopefully that won't get my channel shut down. Apparently I'm not supposed to tell people that. I don't know why, but there it is. Let me see, any other comments? Let me see, just want to make sure I didn't miss anything. Sorry, guys. Let me just scroll back. Oh, I did miss some stuff. Oh, goodness. Okay. One person is working on world building. That's awesome. Ooh, slash and puff sleeves. Very cool. Zach says he might go grab a loom and do some tablet weaving. I love tablet weaving. Let me see. Susan says she likes the one pictured that I used in part of my title. Oh yeah, that's one of my original cote, actually. Something there that made me want to comment. Hold on a minute. Apologize. What was it? World building. Oh, tablet weaving. That was it. Yeah. So I was looking through the Hours of Catherine of Cleves, which, if you do not know about the Hours of Catherine of Cleves, go look that up. They are one of the most amazing illuminated manuscripts in the history of the world. And I have looked at illuminated manuscripts across all cultures, from the New World, from, you know, the Americas to Asia to the Middle East, Europe. And the Catherine of Cleves hours are chef's kiss. But in the Catherine of Cleves hours, there's actually a depiction of the Holy Family in their home. And of course, Joseph is off on the corner doing some carpentry thing. And Mary, the Virgin Mary, is sitting there and she's tablet weaving. And she has this amazing tablet weaving loom that I absolutely want recreated. It's two uprights, and it's got two crossbars to support it. And there's pegs facing her, so pointing at her, and there are two wheels on the uprights. And so this would actually allow you to do a pretty long tablet weave by warping a whole lot and wrapping it around those two wheels. And then of course, as she works along, you just unwind one wheel and wind up the finished on the other one. So I want to have a tablet weaving loom made like that. That's one of a lot of people work on ankle looms, but I've never actually, I haven't seen an ankle loom like that depicted in medieval, either in the archaeology or the iconography, but this one in the Catherine of Cleves hours looks viable, practical, and portable also, which is important. Yeah. Let me see. Of course, Zach says, I've got my box loom and I have a 32 tablet band in wool, tan, and black. Nice. Or in wool, tan, and black. Nice. Gypsy Rose says, I am very much in costuming and find I've been approaching my world building through the clothes they wear. Yeah, you know what? That's kind of how I also tell people, advise people if they want to get into medieval living history to choose their time and place is really pick it based on the clothing you like, because that's the most visual and corporeal aspect of the culture. So, you know, if you want to be 9th century Norse and then you don't like the clothing, so you don't wear 9th century Norse clothing, but you're 9th century Norse, what's the point? So I always advise people, find fashions you like and then go from there. That's my suggestion. You can always make the culture work for you somehow, but if you don't like the clothes, then why are you even picking that culture? But that's just me. Those are my priorities. I realized a long time ago that I've always liked playing dress up in historical clothing. My earliest memories from childhood are of playing make believe in olden times, right? I didn't understand what that was as a 5-year-old. But in retrospect, whenever I envisaged olden times, it was the Middle Ages. Yeah. Zach says, I think what I was describing sounds a bit like the Swedish band loom. Yeah. You know, it's you know, some things, sometimes if it's not broken, you don't fix it, right? You keep, some things don't necessarily have to actually be modified and changed over time, and they can stay the same for centuries. I always like to caveat that just don't expect that something that might seem traditional now necessarily existed in the Middle Ages, but sometimes you actually find that it did. Yeah. Gypsea Rose says, so the more about clothes I can get, the more I have to work with. Right. Yep. Yeah, the exploration of medieval Irish clothing has been frustrating and gratifying all at the same time, because it isn't easy, because the resources aren't as widely available, in part because there was a massive iconoclasm in Ireland in the 16th and 17th century. Henry VIII, of course, when he broke away from the church and basically looted all of the monasteries. And then the Puritans, Cromwell came and finished the job. So much of the what would be iconographic evidence for fashion in medieval Ireland has just been destroyed or burnt up. And then more tragedy. In 1921, there was a massive fire in Dublin where the archives were, which is where so many medieval manuscripts and medieval documents were, and they just went up in smoke in 1921. Bad year, because also in Tokyo, there was an earthquake in 1921 in Tokyo that leveled Tokyo, set it on fire, and a lot of medieval Korean heritage went up in flames because they had been borrowed by the Japanese during the colonial period. And so 1921, bad year for heritage and history. Okay, let's see. This warp will be about 10 yards, and I have 2 more done in the same yard, one at 7 cards, one at 16, each at 10 plus cards. This will probably be a trim on a future doublet coat, etc. Nice, nice. Yeah, Gypsy Rose, very sad. But it does make it a little more challenging to do research on clothing and culture in this era, which is for the explorer in me, it's exciting then when you find something, because then you found like you actually discovered an interesting thing instead of just reading, you know, a whole bunch of things that other people have written about or read before. So there's an upside for the kind of explorer that I am, that level of destruction, but it's a very small upside, because otherwise it can get a little frustrating when you're trying to actually crystallize a view of what fashion was in 15th century Ireland. But the more I dig, the more I find, and eventually I'm going to have to, I think today I'm putting my foot down. No more researching. I'm just going to write the script, publish what I have. I already opened the script up with, this will absolutely not be a comprehensive exploration because the top research is ongoing. So I'm just going to have to stick to my guns on that one, hopefully. Yeah, it's really, and Bohemia is unfortunately the medieval Bohemia, 15th century Bohemia is very similar, in that there was an iconoclasm during both the Hussite Wars, and then again in the 16th century in the second, what I'm kind of calling the Second Reformation, even though it's historians of course call it the Reformation, and the Hussite War is kind of a proto-Reformation, but point is that I've also been doing a lot of research into 15th century Bohemian clothing, specifically to try to capitalize on the almighty algorithm and the newly released Kingdom Come Deliverance 2, and also Kingdom Come Deliverance 1. I have a video putting together on the women's clothing in that video, especially the Lady Stephanie's clothing. And unfortunately, because of that iconoclasm, those series of iconoclasms, and then of course World War II didn't help, and the 30 Years' War. There's a whole bunch of wars that have just been really bad for the artistic record in what is now the Czech Republic, and so it's been a bit of a slog to find the evidence for 15th century Bohemian clothing, Czech clothing. There's also a bit of more of a language barrier there because I don't speak, read, or write Czech at all, whereas I do speak, read, and write pretty much all of the Western European languages to some degree. So it's been a bit more of a challenge, but even there, I have managed to find some good discoveries to help inform our idea of 15th century Czech clothing. So that's been interesting as well. So I've just been exploring all of these sort of peripheral, literally, like, you know, because Ireland is at the edge of Europe, and the Czech Republic is kind of, at that time, was the edge of Western Europe, because from there, once you start getting east, you get a lot more of a Slavic influence. So I've been exploring all of these peripheral parts of medieval Europe that it's been very gratifying, I have to say. Let's see. Okay, so I actually have this fantastic yellow silk thread that I bought years ago when I was still in Germany. I got on eBay because what was happening in the early, sort of at the end of the aughts and about 2010-ish, a whole lot of elderly German women, I need my wax, they had reached the end of their life, and they were passing on, and they were leaving to their heirs all of this silk sewing thread that they had, because, you know, women in that generation all sewed. And so these elderly German women had these massive troves of silk sewing thread. And I know what was happening. They were passing on, and their heirs were inheriting hundreds upon hundreds of spools of silk thread, and they didn't sew. Most people, your average person inheriting grandma's sewing stash doesn't sew. And so on German eBay was coming up for sale these massive collections of random colors of really quality vintage silk thread from like the 60s and 70s. And that's back when it was still, you know, made in Germany and good quality. And so I was able to purchase for a song hundreds upon hundreds of skeins of silk thread in all sorts of colors. So that's what I'm using today, is some of that vintage German silk thread, produced at a time when it says, you know, made in West Germany. So that's a trick for you actually in general. If you're looking for silk thread, check eBay in your respective country. Go for used. If you tick on the box used, or dead stock, if you can do dead stock, and you might be able to find some really great deals on quality vintage silk thread instead of paying, you know, exorbitant amounts for new silk thread. Yeah, let me tell you, lucky on that silk thread find. Yeah, I've got some, and I found some really amazing gauges of silk thread. Like I'm going to put this here. This was one of the ones I found. This is Gutermann, and it's 10-3. It's this, it's like seriously coat level buttonhole silk thread. It is amazing, and look at how much it is there. And I think I paid $10 for a box of 4 of these, basically. Yeah, so that's a trick for looking for supplies, especially for those who like to take a sustainable approach to your creating, is that instead of, I can't seem to find my wax, instead of going to the store and buying new, check out eBay for dead stock. And for used collections of used silk thread. So the search terms I usually use for that successfully are silk thread, in quotes, and then check on the material fiber content box and make sure it's silk. And then dead stock can help you, or check on used, because usually they'll list it as used, because often these spools have been partially used, right? But who cares if it's partially used? Getting a whole lot of it for little money is still a great deal. Let me see. We've been getting amazing fabrics for almost nothing at Savers and Goodwill. Yes, another fantastic tip. By the way, for those who don't know, I have a whole series of videos called Medieval on the Cheap. And I think it's like medieval. I think I did the supercut as like medieval shopping tips or something like that. And I give you all kinds of tips about where to find medieval supplies for your medieval creation, your historical creation projects, and also where to find items that look very, very similar to medieval originals, so that you can kit yourself out without going into debt. And that's, you know, I show the original medieval item, and then I show what I call a cheapo similar that I found at a Goodwill or other equivalent thrift store. So yeah, Goodwill and those types of secondhand stores are a great place to get linen and silk, often in the curtain and bedding section. I actually found an amazing pair of pure white linen curtains, brand new still, with tags, not even used. And it was 2 curtains, and I think it contained about 9 yards of 60-inch wide, beautiful quality white linen. I got it for $9 at a Goodwill in Covington, Washington. So, you know, it takes a little more effort to save money than it does to just buy something outright, but you can really get great deals on stuff at secondhand stores if you hit them often enough. I've also found amazing pure wool yarn at secondhand stores like Goodwill, because again, grandma dies, and, you know, her vintage stash, or her stash of vintage wool roving or vintage actual wool yarn just ends up in the thread bin at a Goodwill or equivalent. Yeah. Let's see. Ooh, 11 yards of silk for $7. Wow, that's fantastic. Zach, was that silk curtains or bedding, or what was it? Yeah, hold on. When my grandmother passed away, I inherited over 1,000 spools of antique thread that belonged to her and my great-grandmother. Yeah, the older the antique thread, the thicker it is. My oldest spool was 1890. Wow. So I mean, and you can tell that the quality of the older thread is just so much better than the quality of the newer thread. The problem with older thread, the problem can be, it's not perforce the problem, but it can be, and some of my thread was dry rotted. And that's just a factor of how it's been stored over time, the conditions to which it's been exposed. So some of it was dry rotted, and you know, that meant that it was pretty much useless for anything. Definitely useless for doing any kind of seams, because even the slightest wear or pressure would just cause it to snap, right? But yeah, you can really, the older stuff, you're right, it gets thicker often, and it's often made of better quality stuff because people used to insist on quality. Oh, Stargazer, hey, it's nice to see you. Sorry I'm late. That's okay. Better late than never, my dear. Another comment, I have found 9 yards of old cotton interfacing and Goodwill bins, along with a yard and a half of green silk brocade. Ooh, nice on that green silk brocade. Wow. For silk brocade, my go-to general source, more reliable, obviously, definitely check the bins at, you know, at your various secondhand stores, because it's amazing what ends up thrown away, or, well, thrown away, donated. But Fabric Guru, also not a channel sponsor. They should be though. Fabric Guru is generally my go-to place for historic patterned silk damasks and also silk velvet. Fabric Guru is one of those, an actual proper fabric outlet for the interior decor houses. So the quality of their silks is generally very high because it's meant for a higher level of use. And so the weight of the silk damasks there are actually the right weight for medieval silk damask. And I often will find good deals on silk damask ends, bolt ends there for, you know, anywhere from $9 to $30 a yard. But keep in mind that this stuff retails at like $300 to $400 a yard. So that's a really good deal on these silk damasks, and silk velvet too. I've gotten there for, you know, anywhere from $20 to $40 a yard. Again, keep in mind, real silk velvet usually retails in the $300 to $400 range. So depending on what your budget is, that may or may not seem like a good deal. But the tip for Fabric Guru is sign up for their email list, and then when about twice a year, they send out discount coupons only for the people who subscribe to their email list, like 15% off, which that's a pretty decent chunk of savings on what can already be pretty good savings. And sometimes, if the bolt end is small enough, if it's like 3 or 4 yards, then they'll mark it down if it's been around too long, and then you can get it on sale and then combine that with your coupon, and you can get a really good pile of in some cases replica 14th and 15th century and 16th century patterns in silk damask from Fabric Guru. Yep. Let's see. Zach says we got 20-yard roll of yellow cotton twill for $4 for, oh, that's great. 20 yards for $4. That's a pretty good grip. Oh, Dupioni. So the silk you got was just plain straight up Dupioni, just donated as yardage, and you got it for $7. That's pretty fantastic. Let's see. Are antique thread spools easy to match with the same company modern dyes? Sometimes, yeah. Because I mean, the reality is that they were using industrial dyes, chemical dyes for these. This post dates the era of natural dyeing. So yeah, very often you can match these colors to the modern spools of thread, you know, Gutermann, for instance, or unfortunately some of these German ones, these companies don't exist anymore. But yeah, it's very easy. You can definitely match the threads pretty closely. Although remember, for historic fashion, threads almost never match the color of the garment on which they're being used. Yeah, so it's kind of less important for medieval clothing, whether the thread matches or not. Let me see. Curtains and duvet covers I found provide the best linens. Oh yes. So thank you for reminding me of that, Chipsaya. First off, you may or may not know that some IKEAs have a fabric section because you can make your own curtains there. At least they used to in America, they still do in Europe. And they often have linen and silk there for really good price. I mean, really good. But also, if you go to I forget what they call it in America. It's called the Fundgrube in Germany. The area where they put all the seconds, all the items that used to be on display and are a little shabby because they were on display, right? At the IKEA, like it's right near before you check out kind of area. If you go to that part of IKEA, you can get amazing fabrics. I got this white linen duvet and pillowcase set for a queen size bed. And this linen is so quality, and the pillowcases so quality. And I got the whole set for $20, and it's a duvet, so that's 2 layers of queen size duvet linen, plus the pillowcases, which are queen size pillow size, so bigger than, you know, just a double size pillow. $20. I mean, you can't beat that, and it's good quality linen. And I've been hesitant to actually cut it up because actually it's really a nice linen sheet basically, and I've basically just used it now as my summer linen sheets. So I bought it to cut it up and turn it into a kamicha, and I just haven't been able to actually bring myself to take my nice summer sheets and turn them into clothing. So yeah, that kind of backfired a little bit. But linen is just such a better fabric for sleeping for me. It just breathes so much better than cotton does. But that's just me. Let's see. It would be fun for you to have a live stream discussion with Jason Kingsley about the medieval times. So that comes from Mang Kepwang. I'm going to confess ignorance about who Jason Kingsley is. Could you give me some more information? I am always happy. I love doing it. I've been collaborating with Philip from Irish Medieval History, and we've been having such a good time. So I'm definitely open to collaborations, 100%. So if you can just, if you know how to contact Jason Kingsley, I'm certainly happy to chat and do more collaborations. Is anyone near Hartford, Connecticut? I will be doing a D-stash in the next 6 to 9 months. Trying to think, are any of my regular followers that I know are from the Connecticut area? My mother's from Connecticut, as I mentioned at the beginning of this stream. Let's see. Second Chance. Yes, thank you, Gypsea. So IKEA, the place where they put the seconds, as it were, from the display floors at IKEA. It's called the Second Chance bin. Go in there and just look, check out the curtains, check out the bedding, check out the sheets. That's where I've gotten some amazing finds for textiles. Yeah. Yep. Let's see, we are planning to move to Scotland. Oh, Glasgow. Glasgow is actually making a comeback. So Glasgow's definitely not the shaggy place it used to be. And it used to be quite shaggy, but it's definitely made a nice comeback, I have to say. Okay. Just gonna bury that needle and bring it up here to start actually attaching this to the outside. Oh no, I buried the needle too well. It's too short. No. There we go. Okay. Yeah, I'm kind of frustrated because I couldn't find my wax. So I'm actually sewing this with no wax. And, you know, the reality is that if you don't wax your thread and you're hand sewing, it will eventually knot on itself, and it's less likely to do so if it's waxed. And it also makes it stronger and last longer and all that kind of stuff. But whatever, we're plowing ahead because I don't want to take time from this live stream and go dig up the wax. I thought it was in my sewing box. Oh, by the way, speaking of IKEA finds, do you see this lovely bentwood box? Looks just like a medieval bentwood box, right? Well, they occasionally sell these at IKEA also because, of course, bentwood boxes are still a going concern in Sweden. And my father got this for me as a Christmas present, as a receptacle for some items from Historic Enterprises. So this was my gift box for Christmas many, many years ago. I've had this for 24 years, and I've pack it and put it in my suitcase and haul it around with me. It goes to Penzic, it goes to all of my medieval living history events all over the world, and it is still going strong. So if you are looking for a bentwood box, because of course this is a very medieval European style of storage container, bentwood boxes, if you start looking for them, you're going to see them everywhere in the iconography from the various centuries of medieval Europe. And it also makes a good coronet container for my armor and castings coronet. But I put the coronet in, and then I put all my sewing supplies in there, and that just kind of becomes my 2-in-1 or 20-something in one transport for going to medievalist events across the world. So yeah, another great IKEA find, right? Because, you know, a handmade bentwood box can actually be very expensive, but you can also find bentwood boxes at flea market antique stores. I've gotten some great deals on really nice actual shaker bentwood boxes for ridiculously low amounts of money. So Another tip. Medieval storage in my modern life for the win. Let's see. A question. What is the green garment you are wearing? Ah, okay. This is a jogori. This is a modern Korean kind of, oh, sorry. Oops. Sorry. This is basically kind of, it's like a modern bolero. It's kind of the Korean version of a bolero, but this is a modern version. This is not a historic version. I actually live in Korea a lot. Often I spend a lot of time in Korea, and I have a very large wardrobe of Korean clothes, both historical and modern, and I just wear them a lot in my daily life. It's actually part of a general movement here in Korea for people to start wearing hanbok again. Young people are really starting to transition into doing that more often. So yeah, this is a jogori. You can see it's got, right, opens, and then we close it, and it's probably messing with the microphone. I apologize. And then we do the haute koram, which is the clothing knot. Once, twice, grab it through. And then if I want extra security, I put a pin in here to prevent my active lifestyle from accidentally untying it. Yep, that's what I'm wearing. I'm not wearing a tima, a Korean tima. I'm just wearing a skirt, and then I've got my turtleneck on underneath of it. It's one of my common Western Korean hybridized looks. Very popular when I go out and about. Lots of compliments from Korean men and women on my ensemble. Bentwood box, do they have lids? No, I'm sorry, I'm not familiar. Not a problem at all. They definitely have a lid. I'm using the lid as a saucer right here. Yep, here is the lid. This is the lid for this Bentwood box. Hold on. The lid has taken some more damage. I told you, I've hauled this. This thing has more frequent flyer miles than most Americans get in a lifetime. So it has really proven its worth. So IKEA, this was a great item 24 years ago. If you're not still carrying it, you should carry it again. The medieval bentwood boxes, and I have two, and they're over there, sorry. They actually have a lid that has sides and actually comes down over top. This is the more modern Swedish style of lid. But hold on. Basically, what I do to help keep the lid on is I have this carrying strap that we added to it. And when I travel with it, if I'm really worried about it coming undone, I just take one of my many bands of finger loop braiding and tie it shut, and that's fine for transport. Back to the joggery. The pin tucks here. Yeah, so these are pin tucks. Let me see if I can show you here. Yeah, these are pin tucks, and that is totally a modern fashion. So this is another thing that signifies this is not a historic joggery, because there's no historic ones with pin tucks. This is definitely the modern fashion, these pin tucks. Yeah, it is quite nice, isn't it? This, believe it or not, was actually a freebie that I got from one of my hanbok makers here in Daegu as a thank you for buying things from me. It's called service in Korean. Very often you'll get a freebie when you purchase something. And so this joggery was a freebie for when I commissioned, what did I commission from her? Oh, I commissioned a Rami joggery. So one made of what is that fabric called? Not flax, hemp. No, not hemp, that's Sambe. Rami is nettle cloth. Nettle cloth, right, yeah. I commissioned a Rami joggery from her, and so she tossed this one in as a freebie. This is not made of silk or anything. This is definitely some kind of very synthetic fabric. But, for that, I am perfectly comfortable abusing it and wearing it to do pretty much anything. Unlike my silk and Rami joggery that I treat very, very carefully. Let's see. Korean fashion is neat. What's the temperature in Daegu? It is bitterly cold here in Daegu this morning, ladies and gentlemen. It is dry and cold and about 0 centigrade or 32 degrees Fahrenheit, which with as bitterly cold as it, as bitterly dry as it is just uncomfortable, really. It is not a comfortable temperature outside. It's sunny as hell. It is bright and sunny, but it is bitter cold. Let me see. I once found 12 cotton kimono. Wait, you found 12 cotton kimonos in the Goodwill bins? Wow, that is pretty amazing. Again, I'm just kind of amazed at what some people will just discard, right? So I'm just doing a quick and dirty whip stitch here to attach this finger loop braiding. And we'll see whether I like that or not. But because of the two-tone nature of the braid, I'm pretty certain that this quick and dirty whip stitch is going to pretty much vanish into it. I might decide to switch over to a blind stitch, which is this is a blind stitch. So the blind stitch basically, and actually I think I am going to switch to the blind stitch just because the blind stitch buries a lot more of the thread inside of the fabric, which protects it and makes it will last longer. Whereas with the whip stitch, most of the stitch, a good chunk of it is on the surface, and then it's subject to wear and tear. And I'll be honest, ladies and gentlemen, I live a hard and fast-paced lifestyle, especially in my medieval life. So the more that my stitches are protected from me is probably the better. Yeah, and I'm thinking about this. I think I'm actually going to run this. I'm going to put this right at the edge of the neckline finishing, and that's going to actually leave a little bit of the pink over top of it. So I think that's going to be a nice contrast. So it'll be the blue, the little band of pink here at the top from the actual neckline, and then the green and gold from the finger loop braiding. And I think I think I like that. I think that's how I'm going to try to keep it as straight as possible, because this finger loop braiding is just proving so challenging otherwise. It wants to snake kind of violently all over the place. So this is actually the first thing I've finger loop braided from this set of this particular silk thread yarn. It's more like yarn. Yeah, it's definitely more like yarn than thread, but yeah. It's the first I've finger loop braided from it, and it is a little challenging because it's very slinky and very flexible. It's like in humans. It's good to be flexible. It's bad to be hyper flexible. And any of you who are hyper flexible, you know whereof I speak. Let me see. Back to the 12 kimonos. It looked like someone had dumped their grandma's collection to be worked on kimonos. Some of them seem to be stopped in the middle of the embroidery work. Oh my God, what an opportunity. Oh wow. I mean, that's sad. That's really sad, but also an opportunity. Last April, I went on a Japan and Taiwan cruise with my family, some of my family anyway, and in Hiroshima, there was a secondhand kimono seller, and she had on display this gorgeous, I'm sorry, it's packed up somewhere, so I can't show it to you, this gorgeous formal silk kimono that had real gold work embroidery all over it. And it's these beautiful chrysanthemums, fully lined, beautiful big sleeves, and I bought it. She was selling it for $200, and it was really funny. I saw it. I said, how much? She said 200. I said, I'll take it. And she was expecting a fight, because most Americans will bulk at that price, right? And then she tried to sell me on it, and I said, no, I want it. Here's my credit card. Let me have the kimono. And her jaw dropped open, because she wasn't expecting me to just appreciate the value of this handmade item. And she really thought she was going to have to work hard to sell me on it. I'm like, $200 is a song. It's all hand sewn, no machine sewing anywhere. The internal seams, all hand sewn. The gold work embroidery, I mean, and I'm pretty certain it's real gold, actually. So yeah, I bought it, and I need to get the other pieces for the ensemble, because all I have is the kimono, and there's many other layers that need to go with it. But it's waiting for its time. Let's see. Joshua Nichols says, just wondering, I'm thinking about going to Penzik. What would be the best preparation for Penzik? This would be my first time. Penzik. Okay. So, yeah, I actually have a video I did on Penzik tips. If you go, I think it was a live stream. So if you go and check that out, look up Penzik tips, something like that. It's a pretty good video. But in general, if it's your first time, the first thing you need to think about is where you're camping. Now, for those who don't know, Penzik is a 2-week medievalist event in Pennsylvania that happens the last weekend of July to the 2 weeks after that. And it's hosted by the Society for Creative Anachronism. And I know various of you have various feelings about that, but just, I don't want to hear it if it's negative, because, you know, there's plenty of negative stuff going around out there in general. Anyway, you will need to actually think about whether you want to camp by yourself, which is called singles camping, or if you want to camp in a group, if you know anyone who's going and you want to camp with their group. Because there are groups who, you know, they organize in advance and they have their own set of little plot of land and they have their own encampment and their own like infrastructure and facilities, or you can just do singles. So that's the first thing you're going to need to think about. I have my own immersive medieval encampment. So our focus is on stepping out of the modern era and really, you know, trying to act and interact like medieval courtly people and not discuss modern things and not behave in modern ways. So if you're interested in that, let me know, because we definitely have that as an option. Then of course you have to think about having enough clothing. Because it's for however long you're going to be there. And you have to consider that your clothing should be flexible for weather, because I've had Penzics where I could see my breath at nighttime, not exaggerating. And I've had Penzics where I barely wanted to put something on top of my smock because it was so hot. So yeah, you'll want to have clothing that is good for multiple weather. I really recommend linen layers for the win, for that reason. And actually this wool, I've worn this wool in Thailand, this wool gown, I have worn it in Thailand in, you know, 40 degree, 95% humidity, 40 degrees centigrade. So 100 degrees and 90% humidity, and it was comfortable. So you want natural fibers, is my point. And that's not a question of authenticity. That's a question of practicality. You'll also want to make sure that some things people don't realize about Penzic, there's tons of classes. There's hundreds of classes a day on a wide variety of amazing topics researched by amazing people. You can learn hands-on skills, you can theory, language. Yeah, so, you know, make sure to check out the classes for Penzic. You'll need to bring anything you want. Anything you need to be comfortable, you need to bring. Nothing is provided. I mean, there are bathrooms, there are showers, there are flushing toilets. There's also plenty of very cleanly maintained porta potties. But, you know, in terms of bedding, in terms of lodging, so you'll need to bring your own tent, your own whatever kind of bed you need to be comfortable, your own towel, your own toiletries, right? You'll need to bring everything, your own cooler, your own food supply if you're camping alone instead of with a camp. So yeah, the basic thing is you'll need to, you know, make sure you have everything you need to be comfortable, because there is infrastructure at Penzic, but not personal infrastructure. Yeah. Let me see. Yeah, so what's going on in the comments? Yeah, definitely all good stuff. All good stuff there from Zach. I mean, it is probably a good suggestion to go to some other medievalist camping events before you go to Penzic. On the other, I mean, it's definitely good advice. On the other hand, I know a lot of people who only ever go to Penzic, and it's their first ever event. So, I mean, if you can go to a you know, medievalist camping event with some group or another before going to Penzic, that's kind of maybe recommended. But on the other hand, Penzic is its own world. It really is. It's not, you know, there's extremely authentic medievalist parts of it, and there's extremely not even a little bit historical parts of it. So I guess you need to kind of be prepared for that too, that there's different levels, and that everyone picks their own level, and there is no policing. It's not like a standard living history encampment where they actually police things like that. There is absolutely no authenticity policing at Penzic. So that's a good tip to take away. But for that, there can be really magical, beautiful moments at Penzic, because you can actually get critical mass of, you know, people interested in whatever esoteric niche aspect of medieval history you are. You can probably get critical mass of other people interested in that niche aspect of the Middle Ages at Penzic, because there are enough people to hit critical mass for pretty much everything. Yes. Let me see. Are you in the SCA? Kingdom of the West for the win. Am I in the SCA? Yes. I am. Yes, I have been. And again, I refuse to accept snobbery about the SCA. I understand its foibles and I understand its strengths. I have been a member of the SCA since 1995. And I was once the Queen of Drachenwald, for those who know what that means. And I'm a Master of the Order of the Laurel. So yeah, I am also all of those things. But I also participate in other groups and also do my own thing with my own household. So, you know, I managed to get it all in, so to say. So technically, I guess I am in the Kingdom of the West because I'm in Korea. This is the Barony Palatine of the Far West. But, you know, we almost never really see the West, we almost never see the crown here. And, you know, it's kind of, we're out here on the marches, as it were. Yeah. Let me see. Also, much of what you might need, you can buy there if you want to spend money. Okay, yeah, so that's a good point. So at Penzik, there are 200 something merchants. And he is right that most anything you might need, you can possibly buy there. You will spend more money on it probably, but you can buy you can outfit your entire medieval wardrobe at Penzik, from very authentic to very fantastical, but it will not be inexpensive. You can buy reenactment goods there. You can buy pottery. Yeah, you can buy equipment for a medieval cooking fire. Yeah, Zach is right. Penzik has a massive merchant presence, and you can pretty much buy anything you could need there to create whatever kind of, you know, medieval encampment you want, from, as I said, from fantasy all the way to pretty authentic. But it will cost a lot of money to do so. Handmade items are perforce expensive. And I think, you know, in the West, we have divorced ourselves so much from handmade items that we've forgotten that, you know, time and skill costs money. And so, you know, at Penzik, there's a lot of handmade items, and a lot of people say, oh gosh, that's so expensive. But my point is, why don't we spend less money, have less things, but therefore have more quality items made by a real person with real talents? Yeah, that's my approach. I've you know, in addition to to thrifting, to try to also make sure I patronize actual artists and artisans and have actual handmade pieces in my collection made by someone who got paid a good wage for doing so. Soapbox off. Let's see. Oh, Barony of the Three Mountains. Nice. Let me see. Zach says he's weaving on a loom he got there at Penzik and drinking his tea tonight from a Penzik mug. Yep, let me see. I don't think I have anything. Oh, well, that's not true. Okay, so yeah, this finger loop braiding that you see here, this was made with silk yarn that I bought at Penzik. So especially for textile supplies, Penzik is a great place because the prices are actually really good. I will say this. Textile supplies at Penzik are the same prices or less than you can get them online. And then also you're supporting an actual person and merchant and not some, you know, shady company in China or wherever. Yeah, you can get some pretty hard to find textile supplies at Penzik pretty easily. It's one of the things we love going to the marketplace and going shopping, because we textile people can just go shopping for silk batting or, you know, silk yarn in a variety of gauges and colors. It's nice to be able to just go and do that off the rack and then know exactly what you're getting instead of praying that the thing you ordered online is the thing you actually want. Let me see. Zach says, I also learned to spin at Penzik this last summer. Yeah. Yeah, that falls right in with all the skills you can learn at Penzik, all the medieval practical hand skills you can learn at Penzik. Yeah, you can learn to spin, you can learn to weave, you can learn to make your own pigments for painting and illumination. You can learn calligraphy and illumination. You can learn blacksmithing. You can learn how to build an oven, a medieval oven, and how to use it. You can learn pottery. There's just so many things you can learn at Penzik, and for free, for the cost of entry, sometimes cost of materials. But at Penzik, we teachers are volunteers. I teach hours and hours of dance at Penzik and lead balls. So, you know, at Penzik, the teachers are volunteers. There's no place in the world where you can get this much bang for your buck. It's impossible, because we're all volunteers sharing our knowledge. Hi, your videos inspired me to make a structured journée. Oh, fantastic. Ardens, have you started your structured journée yet? Yeah, that's definitely on my list to get to when I have more creative energy. Right now we're focusing on a new arming farsetto for my condottiero. But yeah, especially with all the learnings I have from Diego di Cavaniglia's extant journée and looking at more and more artwork, I definitely have some good ideas for it. So yeah, let me know, Ardens, if you've actually started your journée, how's it going? What have you settled on for your layers and materials? For those who don't know, a giornea is what, if there's any just immediately around me, there aren't. It's that very quintessential 15th century Italian overgarment that some people call a tabard. It's not a tabard though, tabard is a very specific thing, but it's open on the sides and it just drapes down in front and back. And often you see it with these really nice, heavy, round organ pleats, these really squishable pleats, right? And it's often they're lined in fur. Sometimes they're belted in front and or back or not. That's the giornea. And it's one of the overgarments that men wore in 15th century kind of across the Italian peninsula. And you had to wear it. You had to wear something over your farsetto. People who wander around in just their doublet and hosen are just scandalous. You have to wear something over that unless you're in the middle of having a street brawl or playing a stupid game, stupid slap game specifically, called civettini, a game in which three men stand on each other's feet and try to slap each other. And I'm not making this stuff up. This is a real 15th century game. Let me see. Joshua says, I've been on several medieval camping trips and LARPs, but I've never done anything with the SCA. BT, by the way, that's a beautiful stitch. Well, thank you. Yeah, so if you've done other things like this, then you're going to be fine at Pennsic. So then my tips for Pennsic are going to be more specific because you've obviously done some of the camping thing. So yeah, definitely. I check out the classes, check out the Pennsic University webpage. Also note there's an entire dance pavilion where I spend a lot of my time teaching and leading dance. And there's balls every night with live music and authentic medieval and Renaissance dancing. The different balls are organized by different people and have different themes. Mine will be the red and gold ball because red and gold are my heraldic colors. You'll want to make sure you check out the battles and there's fencing and there's harness fighting. And yeah, the SCA now does harness fighting, by the way. It's in its experimental phase, but it is taking the SCA by storm. So you can actually do proper harness fighting using actual medieval fighting techniques from fighting manuals, where armor as worn actually counts towards the conditions of victory. Let's see, what else at Pennsic? There are parties down in the bog every night. Those parties will be not even a little bit medieval though. So that's really just where you get your kind of LARP fantasy parties happening with lots and lots of alcohol. Unfortunately, Pennsic, because of the legalization of marijuana, which by the way, I support in general, the thing I don't like is people smoking pot everywhere because I think it smells like the worst thing ever. I would rather smell a rotting corpse, and I'm really not kidding you. And I know the difference in the smell. Marijuana has become very common at Pennsic to be smoked, and so you will just, especially in the party areas, so you will definitely smell a lot of marijuana. So if that's a problem for you, you might want to bring a breathing apparatus. But it's heavier towards the less authentic parts of Pennsic and less so towards the more medieval parts of Pennsic. There seems to be some kind of Venn diagram of overlap there. Which is not to say that you won't also smell it in the more authentic parts. You will, there'll just be less of it. Let's see. Arden says, I'm having some trouble figuring out the pleats. I decided to use a very nice thick black cotton velvet. Ooh, nice, lined in red wine linen. Since I live in Spain, I decided not to use padding for heat reasons. Interesting. I mean, yeah. And actually, not all giornea were padded, so that's actually okay. And in fact, some of them were just lined in fur to help bulk them out, which ironically fur might actually allow it to breathe better than some of the padding options. Yeah, so the pleats are a bit of a trick. It's a draping trick. Have you, Ardens, I guess you've checked out then, since you said it was my channel that inspired you, or my content that inspired you, you've checked out the first part of my Jornea making video, published about a year ago, or a year and a half ago at this point. I haven't made any more progress on working on any Jornea because life has just been beating us up really hard and other things got in the way. But I will say that they're definitely, to get the pleats right, it really has to do with the drape of your garment, because you actually want some of the effects of the bias to help create that pleating and help bulk out, to help make them actually be round. So, you know, often we say in tailoring, no, avoid the bias, avoid the bias, avoid the bias, because it's going to distort your garment. But in this case, if you look at the way Diego de Cavanilla's Jornea, the way the grain is, it actually takes advantage of the bias. And there's actually some extant garments from Schloss Lengberg in Austria that they found in the walls of the castle, or the ceilings, or the floors. And there's some gowns, remnants of the bodices of what are most definitely women's gowns. And what they found out is that to create those bulk organ pleats that you see on the 15th century German women's gowns, it's this amazing tailoring style that actually, it takes this full circle thing, and it actually takes complete advantage of the bias, so that when you open this thing up and it's sitting on your body, then the bias creates those big full pleats in the front, and then those pleats can be secured. There's actually an article on it on the Langberg find. So it really seems that to get that organ-shaped pleat to be really natural but also look round and bulky, you've really got to take advantage of the bias. And, you know, some people, Arden's comment is his projects are for LARPing too. You know, a lot of, there's a good chunk of the living history world that has very disparaging things to say about the LARPing community, but I don't, for many reasons. One, I think LARPers approach, especially historical LARPers, approach history from a much more fun perspective. And I think I think also that there's a lot of historical LARPers out there who do amazingly authentic and accurate things. And I believe that authenticity is a spectrum, and that everyone should be able to choose their level of authenticity, and that there shouldn't be judgment about that. You choose, you do what's right for you. And if you're part of a group, then you should probably do what's right for that group, or the group won't allow you in, but there shouldn't be any kind of value judgment about that. In any case, it's almost impossible to be perfectly authentic unless you actually travel back to the Middle Ages and actually use only materials that existed at that time. Because cultivars of plants change, strains of animal breeds change. You know, there's a lot of things used in medieval production that are toxic and we can't use anymore, and that's going to affect the authenticity of an item. So when it comes to the end of the day, it's not a question of who's, you know, perfect authenticity. It's a question of you choosing your level of authenticity. And I can always find ways to poke holes in someone's level of authenticity if they really want to be mean about it. Yeah. Let's see. Back to Penzic tips. Wear good shoes, and 2, stay hydrated. So good shoes. Actually, my happiest Penzics are walking around barefooted. Like the Irish, circling back to medieval Irish fashions. There was a Penzic where it, let me see, it was 2005, I think. The last 3 days of Penzic were diluvial, biblical levels of rain. It was, oh my God, bad. I just realized I think I knocked this. It was, oh my God, bad. And we literally just had like a foot of mud everywhere. Everything was mud. The roads had turned to mud. The camps were mud. And I just gave up wearing shoes. And I hiked my skirts up. I kilted the skirts of my gowns up, my smock and my gown. And I walked around in bare feet, and it was a really great 3 days for my feet. I think my feet have never been so smooth and so hydrated. But yeah, so shoes, I will tell you that you have to decide what are good shoes for you. I wear only medieval shoes at Pennsic. I only wear medieval turn shoes at Pennsic and Pattons, and I dance and I walk for miles and miles, and my feet are just fine. So, you'll have to decide what is comfortable and good for you. But I can tell you it's absolutely possible to wear authentic medieval footwear and be fine. It kind of depends on your own feet. Some people can't. Some people have fallen arches or foot damage or arthritis or whatever. So yeah, the tip on finding good footwear is a good one, but what is good footwear will vary from person to person. I'm one of those people who believes that actually less shoe is more natural for the way humans have evolved and probably would lead to less musculoskeletal issues, but I understand that's contrary to the establishment. Tip 2 at Pennsic, hydrate. Yes, and actually this is true at any living history or even LARP camping event. Stay hydrated, people. To help you with that, there are actually some medieval ways to stay hydrated. You can actually, if Costrol is a molded leather bottle, and most of the ones I've seen are from the 15th century. And apparently it seems that maybe it was only an English custom, but I don't necessarily adhere to that bit of dogma. Anyway, a molded leather bottle that you can actually strap onto your belt or wear a kind of bandolier style around your chest, and then you can just carry water around with you all the time and refill it whenever you can, but then you'll always have water to just kind of constantly take a sip. See, this is what happens when you don't wax your thread. It knots up. Anyway, yeah, so stay hydrated when you're doing medieval living history. And especially if you get excited and you get kind of swept up in the moment and you're dancing or you're engaging in combat and you just kind of get lost in the moment and then you forget to drink and then eventually you pass out. So that's not good. Speaking of which, Pennsic has passing out. Pennsic actually has an emergency medical facility on site, a first aid station operated by the local EMT, and it's very, very good, and it's part of your cost of entry. And so, if any medical emergencies are handled pretty quickly. And there's also a helipad on the battlefield where they can medevac people out, and every year at least one person gets medevaced. So, let's see, next step will probably be a Buxton style cloak. Yeah, I haven't made the Buxton cloak, but I have made many Buxton tunics, which are just create this beautiful full skirted, kind of, not fitted is too strong a word, but it's a tunic that follows the curves of the body. And for a gentleman who is in good shape, it's a really good look. Yeah, I've made a bunch of Buxton tunics. I actually did a set of embroidered cuffs for, red silk with white silver thread or silver silk embroidery. Really, I was really proud of that one. Let's see. I have seen jousting done at a few East Kingdom events. Yeah, jousting is definitely something that is has become firmly rooted in the SCA. Fortunately, not at Pennsic because they don't allow horses, but maybe that will change someday. So there are no horses at Pennsic. If you want to do equestrian stuff, Pennsic is not the event for you, sadly. There are people that are allergic to marijuana. Yep, there are. One of my apprentices in waiting is super allergic. She gets migraines. So Pennsic is getting really rough for her. It's very frustrating. I wish more smokers of anything would be a little more aware of how their smoke impacts other people and be more conscientious about it and more considerate. It's kind of my thing. I'm a live and let live person until the way you're living directly impacts me, then I stop being live and let live. And marijuana smoke is definitely a direct impact. Back to my comments on historical LARPing. Historical LARPers win on that side. It's definitely much more fun and your kit gets more grounded by far. Yeah, no, I agree. By the way, if you ever want me to come to your LARP event, I am happy. I can be hired to come and lead dance and just be generally the Contessa, teach workshops, etc. I think historical LARP events are pretty awesome, or even fantastical LARP events. It's all fun. It's all escapism, right? For me, part of the joy of the medieval exploration is the escapism. I feel particularly connected to the medieval period for whatever weird reason. I don't know why. I just always have felt connected really hard to the 15th century, particularly. But I actually do enjoy all periods and all kinds of costume-based escapism. Hold on. Back to the talking about using bias pleats. I apparently missed a whole bunch of comments. I'm sorry, guys. I was talking and sewing. I've completely fallen behind on the chat. I apologize. Catching up now. Talking about the bias cut and the pleats. Joshua says those big bias fold pleats in the Langberg find I used as a pattern for modern crushed velvet train that swirled from the hip to a 15-foot train that swirled around the front of the body and the back. Oh, that sounds gorgeous. Wow. Good on you for using a 15th century tailoring technique that has largely been forgotten by time in a modern garment. Love it. Oh yeah, okay. So Arden, apparently you watched the video on my journey. Great. It was more a question of how to distribute the fabric. I'll probably go for 6 big pleats as I read on some forums. For the pattern, I opted to do it rectangular because of it being, oh, apparently the comment ran out there, because of it being structured. Yeah, so rectangular. The thing is that if you look at the art depicting the Jornea, what is, you know, definitely a structured one, structured in some way. It nearly always you see that the pleats get wider at the bottom. It's not columnar pleats. They actually get wider as they go down, which is definitely more challenging to create that bulk. So I'm not certain if I would personally recommend a rectangle, but you know, let me know how it turns out. That's just my feeling and my observations. You know, I'm all for experimentation and trying different things for certain. 6 pleats. So you're talking about the number of pleats total in the front, or 6 pleats here and 6 pleats here? Because the Italian ones definitely come with different numbers of pleats. It's not always one or the other, but if you like 6 pleats, then absolutely go for that. That is a perfectly happy number. It's a felicitous number of pleats, shall we say. Okay, well, let me just stop and see how I feel this is going on the, yeah, that's looking pretty good. So I'm going to be doing the blind stitch down one side, and then I'm going to blind stitch the other side down. You know, a quick and dirty way, if I wanted to attach this neckline way more quickly, I could have just done like a running stitch or some tacking stitches down the center, but that definitely would create a sloppy look. But that's me. That's that's me not liking things to look sloppy. Let me see. Zach comments, I remember a 16th century tailor would have bought the cloth and other goods they used. Yes. Yeah, absolutely. So I think people forget that the medieval production of the medieval garment production was highly specialized. And I mean to the point that your draper is not necessarily, your tailor is not the same person usually doing the sewing. That's your seamstress or your semper. Is not the same person who makes the trims, is not the same person who makes the points, is not the same person who attaches the points, is not the same person who does the embroidery, is not the same person who does the cartoon on which the embroidery is based. Embroideresses didn't design their embroidery, or embroiderers didn't design their embroidery. An artist did that. And then they just worked over top of the cartoon created by the artist. So, you know, medieval garment production, we generally, modern fashion historians, reenactors, LARPers engaged in the recreation of historical fashion, we try to do it all because we're creative and we enjoy all these creative stages for the most part. At least I do. I love doing it all. I love it all. I love, right? If I had the capability and the time, I would absolutely have a 15th century loom and I would absolutely make my own fabric, but I don't. So the point is that we try to do all of these stages when each aspect would have probably been handled by a different specialist, each of the raw materials would have been created by a different specialist. Even in the production of wool involved like 20 different jobs, right? It wasn't one person who started with a sheep and ended up with a woven length of wool. Between the sheep and that finished piece of garment are at least 20 people. And I'm not talking about merchants or any of that just in the production. So yeah, we've definitely forgotten just how very specific and specialized these jobs were. And that's how you get a quality item, really, is when everyone is focusing on their strength instead of trying to do it all. Let's see, I'm still way behind on the chat. I do the same, although a thin layer of rubber is much appreciated to avoid falling down. Oh, shoes. That must be in shoes. Yeah, this is helpful. I'm sorry, guys. I'm sorry I fell behind in the live chat. Here I am sewing and holding forth instead of paying attention to you guys. I apologize. Yeah, so he was talking about shoes. Yeah, some people do also have attached like a thin rubber or some other sole on the bottom, super sole on the bottom, to prevent prevent you from falling down, because medieval turn shoes, which means they're sewn. What's happening? I don't know what's happening. Why did we just, are you all still there? I don't know what just happened. Everything cut out and then came back. Are we all still there? Is it all good? Okay, yeah, so medieval shoes were turned right side out with the seams on the inside, and that's why they're called turn shoes. You know, there's a lot of people wonder, how on earth did medieval people not slip and fall down? Well, because they can get, you know, turn shoes can get really slippery on, you know, dry grass, for instance. But honestly, I think it's that we modern people are used to having super grippy shoes, and so we don't know how to walk in shoes that don't have super grip. We don't know how to distribute our weight, how to step appropriately. So actually, I hypothesize, because I've actually learned to walk differently in medieval shoes so that I don't need a grippy sole, which is not a judgment. I want to put this out there. It's not a judgment on people who add super soles. It's just what I've observed, and my theory about how medieval people contended with the slipperiness of a leather sole is that they just learned to walk differently than we do. They moved differently. They stepped differently. They definitely didn't walk heel toe, because they would have all had these heel spurs by the age of 10. So probably they walked toe heel, and they distributed their weight differently, and they took different precautions. So yeah, that's my theory, and I'm sticking to it. Let me see. I didn't miss it. Oh, yay! One of my apprentices in waiting, the one who's allergic to marijuana, is now in the stream. Hi, Lucrezia. Welcome. Joshua says he usually wears sandals or flip-flops on a daily basis, and at events he uses turn shoes. Less shoes, the better. Yeah, I absolutely agree. I live in Korea, or spend a lot of time in Korea, and a lot of that is kind of living in Korea. And yeah, I wear slippers inside, and they're, you know, there's not much to these, right? And that's mostly because, you know, I want to preserve my socks as long as possible. Yeah, most of my shoes are pretty minimalist. Let me see. I made an arch cover for my foot for fair CA events. Oh, that's cool. Very nice. Let me see. Our tent got hot boxes at an event last night of the event. My driver barely got us home the next day. Her migraines were that bad. Oh, your tent got hotboxed at an event oh my God, I am so sorry. Talking about marijuana. Oh my God, I am so sorry. Yeah, we unfortunately these last 2 years at Penzic have been surrounded by people, and because who smoke in encampments where people smoke pot. And yeah, we've often had to leave the camp because of that. Yeah. Let's see. Okay, back to the Jornea. Oh, Zach, thank you for joining. You've probably already left, though, I assume. I'm so behind. Oh, my God. Didn't seamstresses deal with ecclesiastical garments? Not just. I mean, yes, for certain. There were absolutely, you know, the people who were doing production of garments did them for both secular and religious garments. So it wasn't that there was a special separate set making for secular garments or making vestments or things like that. Yeah. Let me see. Okay. Good, still there. I don't know, something weird happened, the camera cut or not. Arden says 6 pleats at blunt and another 6 pleats at the back. More would be a pain to sew. Yeah, I don't disagree with you at all. And for rectangular, you meant the pattern of the jornea, not the pleats. Didn't know they got wider at the bottom. Yeah, if you maybe go take another look, and you're going to see they generally get wider at the bottom, which is why. And that's why Diego de Cavanilla is like this, even though, so it depends on what you mean by structured, right? What are structured pleats? Structured pleats in a garment can take a variety of forms and be structured in a variety of ways. So Diego's jornea was actually structured, and maybe you might consider it semi-structured. So it's not that the pleats were sewn in, but for certain, the pleats were affixed to a band, because there's 2 bands that survived with his jornea. And the pleats were definitely affixed to a band at the points of the pleats so that it would hang nicely, but not be stiff and unmoving. So you can still look to his for the structuring, because, you know, it's definitely, it was a structured one. It wasn't a free floating agent the way Giuliano de Medici's jornea is just this kind of bad boy structureless thing that he's kind of casually tossed on. I mean, Giuliano de Medici, what a god. What a sex bomb. He was the ultimate in 15th century, God, I can't even think of the slangy term for it now, but yeah, he was the guy, right? Okay, he was the guy who would show up to the Oscars in a Prada t-shirt and sexy Gucci jeans or something, right? And everyone would still ooh and awe over him, right? That was Giuliano de Medici, and that unstructured jornea he's wearing is, in my opinion, the equivalent of Prada t-shirt and Gucci jeans from a 15th century perspective. Yeah. Let's see what else I've missed. Let me see. I'll be starting my Italian silk gown soon after finishing my wool Burgundian. Oh, Lucrezia, how far have you made it on your wool Burgundian? I know you had gotten something together and then you were angry at it because of the way it sat around your shoulders. Did you ever fix that? And Arden's. Oh, I'm sorry. Are you still there, Ardens? Your message got retracted. Which jewel? Arden's. Did YouTube dump your message? I think I saw you said, what a sex symbol. Yeah, he was, for certain. I'm sorry if YouTube deleted that, stupid YouTube. Susan says, which Giuliano? Oh, no, sorry, Giuliano de Medici, the one assassinated by the Pazzi, the one whose death basically broke Florence, in my opinion, and started kind of the downfall of the Medici, but also, I guess, probably positioned them for the ultimate rise of the Medici in the 16th, rebirth of the Medici in the 16th century. Yeah, that really sexy, handsome Giuliano, the flower of chivalry of 15th century Italy, that Giuliano, the one who could actually fight in tournaments, unlike poor Lorenzo, who was really kind of sickly and not really able to joust and engage in armed combat, where they had to rig tournaments so that he could win them. Giuliano didn't need a rigged tournament. He won them. Yeah, I sometimes wonder how history would have been different if Giuliano had actually survived. Yeah. Lucrezia says, I'm adding the trim and have mostly fixed the shoulders, have to do another fit. Susan says, Simonetta's perfect white. Yeah, Simonetta Vespucci, the queen of love and beauty. Yeah. I'm really sad that banner didn't survive. The one that Botticelli painted for Giuliana with Simonetta's face on it for that tournament. Oh, God, what a work of art that must have been. Yeah, I'm liking the way this is turning out. It will be a subtle bit of trim, nothing big and overly flashy. It's not a super wide band. I actually only did single loops on this one. I think on the next one, if I wanted to make this wider, this finger loop braiding, I can either find fatter, wider yarn, or I can actually do double, triple, or even quadruple loops to make it wider. There is an extant bit of finger loop braiding from Estonia, from Tallinn, from the 15th century, that where the finger loop braiding, the braid was thickened by putting 4 loops on each finger. And that's, you can actually see that in the extant find. So it is a medieval technique to make a thicker braid without increasing the number of fingers being used, to just increase the number of loops per finger, which is something I started doing years and years ago before I found the Tallinn, before I encountered the Tallinn find to confirm that I was being accidentally authentic. I love it when accidental authenticity is someday backed up by an archaeological find or some other piece of pretty solid evidence. Yeah, I would have, I mean, I wonder how Botticelli's banner looked, because most people don't realize those medieval banners, when medieval painted banners were usually painted in like serious paint, like egg tempera or oil paint even. They were not painted, they were not silk screened. Silk screening is not a medieval technique. So a lot of people who do medieval living history and they have a silk screened banner, it's not an authentic style of painting banners or creating banners. Medieval banners, painted banners, were like serious works of art, and there are actually banner painters. And sometimes, in the case of Giuliano de' Medici, you could afford to commission, you know, the most famous, talented, hot up and coming, hot artistic talent to make the banner for your tournament, or your banner for the tournament. In fact, we actually have evidence of a female banner painter working in Bruges, and her banner actually survived. Not only do we have documentary evidence of this woman working and painting banners for a living in Bruges, but one of her banners actually survived. Isn't that amazing? From the 15th century, I think the 1480s. Just amazing. I love it when we find that kind of information, because often, you know, the French Revolution was super bad for documentary evidence involving 15th century France and Burgundy, because the revolutionaries just burnt shit down willy-nilly, archives. And so a lot of the records we would normally need or want to have for life in 15th century France and Burgundy no longer exist. Thank you, revolutionaries. So when I do happen to find evidence like that survives, I just get so giddy with excitement. Yeah, my bar for excitement is pretty low these days, I'll say. Let's see. And for funerary effigies, yep, same thing. Yes, indeed. So Arden, for the Giornea, I mean, personally, if I were making it, I would probably still go with trapezoids. Rather than rectangles. But that's just me, and you know, I'm definitely excited to hear how your experiment with the rectangles goes. Especially those which belong to the French kings. Yeah, some of those, yeah. The French Revolution has a lot to answer for in terms of historical culture. Yeah, there's a reason that almost nothing inside of Notre Dame de Paris is actually medieval. I mean, the architecture is, but like, you know, all of the altarpieces, they were destroyed. The statues were destroyed. The frescoes were torn down, or set on fire. Yeah. Thank you, French Revolution. Bruges female banner painter. I'm trying to remember for whom the banner. I think she actually painted it for the city of Bruges, which is why it survived. Yeah, or it was either for the city of Bruges or it was for a guild, which is why it survived. One of the Bruges guilds. Yeah. Sure, if I finish it soon, I can send you through Instagram. Oh, great. Thank you, Arns. I appreciate that. No, that's awesome. Hey guys, you know, if you have me on Instagram or on Facebook, I'm always happy for you to share your work with me and show it to me. Like, don't ever worry about burdening me with your messages, right? I love to engage with you all in whatever way we can. Yeah, I look forward to it, Arns. Thank you. I like the trapezoids because when we spin as we dance, our skirts fly out so prettily. Yes, indeed. And in fact, that applies directly to the Giornea and the Turca. There's a 15th century dance manual by Guglielmo da Pesaro, who was a Jewish dance master, and he actually tells men how they should dance in clothing like a giornea. He specifically says that you should grab the edge of the back of it and hold it out as you spin around. So you want to make sure that your giornee are designed in such a way that they will flare out beautifully as you spin when dancing. Yeah, it's funny how you know, sometimes if people get too, if they get too restricted in their living history approach, if they only approach one aspect of, let's say, 15th century life, and they don't try to understand how life was holistically, then they forget that things like clothes need to be danceable in the 15th century, danceable the way 15th century people danced, right? So if you create a garment and you can't do 15th century dance in it, it probably isn't designed correctly or authentically to the 15th century. You know, the same thing with footwear or with armor. If you cannot do 15th century style combat in the piece of 15th century armor that you recreated, then probably you've done something wrong. And is a good point. The turka is the one with the side sewn, right? Yeah, so the turka maybe had side sewn. So here's the thing, right, about historical clothing terminology. For Italy, it can be challenging to sometimes know what the words in the inventories refer to in real terms, right? Because, I think I'm about to shoot. Sorry, guys, my phone is actually about to die. We've got 5% left. Okay, we're just going to keep going. When the live stream ends, it's because my phone has died. But I will have enjoyed talking to you all and sewing with you all so much. But we're not going yet. I've still got 5% left. Anyway, it's very hard to tell sometimes what these terms actually refer to. Sometimes we get lucky, like in the case of that Irish document I mentioned, where you have the Latin, and then in the gloss, there's the medieval Irish term for the thing that's in Latin. And so then we can start getting an idea of, well, at least this thing that we know what it is this other thing that we didn't know. And sometimes if you're lucky, you'll get an illumination, illuminated manuscript that's telling a story, and the garment is actually described in the story, and then it's depicted in the illumination. Right? So then sometimes you can actually develop a real solid idea of what these words are, but it's sometimes hard to tell exactly what a turka may have been. It's very obvious from an etymological perspective that it's somehow, and especially because it doesn't pop up until the second half of the 15th century, that it's somehow something inspired by the Ottoman Turks, right? Some kind of Turkish inspired garment. So yeah, maybe it's closed on the side, or maybe it's one of these cape type things we see that's open on one side and closed on the other. Yeah, either way, it was definitely a voluminous garment because it was designed to be, the edges were designed to be grabbed and you were designed to, swirl around in it, sort of thing. Did you get the Dudley painted effigy I sent you on your Instagram? I don't think so. I will have to go back and dig through my Instagram and check, Susan. I don't think I did. I can't do that because my phone's there. The thing that I'm staring at is my phone. I'll double check and then I'll reach out to you and let you know, because that would be super cool to have. Ardens, I said, I know that very well. Been reading and transcribing testaments and inventories from a noble family from southern Spain. Oh, Ardens, can you share that with me? I don't even need the transcribed. I can work with the paleography just fine. Is it in Latin or is it in Spanish? Southern Spain. Yeah, is it in Latin or in Spanish? Oh my God, that sounds so exciting. Oh my God, you don't know how excited I get when I find inventories and wills. I'm the most dull sounding documents are the most exciting to me. I'd rather read an inventory than an Arthurian romance. Oh my God, I just admitted to being such a Philistine. But yeah, as you can tell, and so here's the other problem with inventories and inventories that are done by people who are just kind of clerks. They don't necessarily, wills also, clerks are the same problem. They don't necessarily use fashion terms the way other people in their era use fashion terms. They don't necessarily use them consistently. And sometimes in the same document, they'll use 3 different terms for what is actually the same kind of garment. So, you know, even documentary evidence can be frustrating. You know, all the different levels of evidence for fashion can be frustrating. Oh, okay. Can you guys hear me? Apparently, my you see. Okay, can you see my hand? Are we still going? Well, let me know. I'm going to keep sewing. Oh yeah, okay, great. So I guess my other phone, that one still has enough charge to keep going. Okay, well, it's going to make it a little harder for me to keep an eye on the comments. Yeah, what was I saying? I was saying something when camera number 1 went dead. That's very interesting because actually the camera that's on right now, that is my guest, and my guest is my Kitties of the Palace kitty channel. Apparently the live stream will keep going even if the host has buggered out. um, anyway, yeah, this will make for an interesting recording for people watching. Suddenly half the screen is black, but that's okay. Still on. Great. Fantastic. What was I saying before before the one screen went black, everybody? Was anyone listening? I got so flustered by it stopping, by that last 5% not lasting nearly as long as it should. I feel like I was talking about something relating to Ireland, maybe? Let me see. Oh, right. Documentary sources. Yeah, right. So all what I call the holy trinity of evidence for historical fashion, documentary, iconographic, and archaeological, each of those prongs comes with their own challenges, right? Art is challenging because artists are artists are creative. Even medieval artists were creative, and they like to apply their fantasy to the things